Basically, I think this is a really good movie. I like to say that because I've done maybe 130 movies at this point, and I can't say that about everything I've been involved in. But The Entity is a really effective movie. I found it gripping. The story was very compelling. Uh, to summarize a little bit what the story meant for me, it was a drama about whether somebody's perception is actual, meaning other people perceive it, or that perception is totally subjective, meaning only that person perceives it. And therefore, Barbara Hershey, the lead character, Carla, is asking herself, am I crazy? Or, in fact, is there something going on here that is crazy, but what's going on is outside of me? So the music has this basic premise to deal with. The audience is wondering the same thing. Is she a nutcase, or is she, in fact, somebody who's perceiving stuff that's really horrific and significant? So I did approach the music with all of this in mind. I felt like the music had multiple tasks to perform in order to help tell the story to the audience. It had to give us a sense of Carla. She's us, and we have to feel sympathetic toward her. So I needed to write a Carla's theme, something that expressed her musically, and it had to be sincere, lovely. She's a lovely character. And from her perspective, her sincerity is valid. She's not just some crazy person, coming up with fanciful stuff. So we have to believe that. So Carla's theme had the responsibility of essentially doing that. The movie as a whole, I think of it as bookends. The movie starts, and we need to tell the audience, okay, you're in for this. And the music has to kind of frame what we're in for. And then when it's over, it has to kind of summarize that. So I felt like the movie required a kind of setup. So we knew that we were dealing with supernatural. We were also dealing with a very dramatic situation. By the way, Carla's theme also involves a love theme as well. So that's Carla's. And we call it that, Carla's theme. If you look on the Village Recorder box that had the original tapes in it, it says Carla's theme. We called it that. The music was in fact recorded at Village Recorders in West LA, a place where a great number of hit records have been done. It's a famous kind of rock and roll studio. So we chose that, overdubbed the strings there, and did a lot of the song, the source music, Mozart, all that stuff was all recorded there. So just, that's a little aside. Back to the musical task. So we had the bookends of the credits. We have Carla's theme. And then we have the essence of the story, which is the entity itself. The entity terrorizes her. And there are three aspects musically to that terrorizing. And the director, Sidney Furie, was very specific about how he wanted to approach the terrorizing of Carla by this entity. He referred to violent attacks, where she's attacked violently by this unseen being, as being the thrasher. That was his way of referring to the kind of music he wanted, something relentlessly pulsating. Then when she's taking a bath, or we're not sure, but we sense that maybe this entity is around, it's not attacking her, but there's an apprehension that she may feel, or she may not feel, but the audience may feel. That he called dread. And again, on the box, you can see it says Thrasher, it says Carla's theme, it says Dread. And we divided dread into two kinds. There was high dread, which was a kind of ethereal dread. And there was a low dread, which was a little more, a deeper, more fundamental, darker dread. So we had those musical elements. The thrasher was pum, 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 that kind of thing. And high dread was kind of a, kind of a floating thing. Same with low dread, a lower floating thing. Then it turns out in the movie, without this being a spoiler, that there is an entity. And so there had to be some kind of music for this thing itself, not just its effect on her, not just her apprehension and this attack, but the essence of this thing. And I'm reminded that this was 1981 when I was writing this thing, and I had a small studio. We weren't doing electronic scores much at this point in time, but I did have some synthesizers. I had Oberheim, I had sequential circuits, I had I believe EMU, the first EMUs, and some other things. And I had an array of Boss, I think it was, pedals, those metal guitar pedals that you could use for reverbing and delays and so forth. So basically, with these tools, I did the score in two settings. I had my small studio where I was trying to create these electronic effects, and then we had the village recorders where we had a studio orchestra with violins and cello and professional musicians playing. So this was a hybrid creation between these two ways of working. And as I say, in 1981, I think that was kind of early. This is before I did Nightmare on Elm Street, which was all electronic. And so I was in kind of experimental territory. For the entity itself, I was doing a kind of, it was very primitive. I had a little microphone that was shipped with Sony's Sound on Sound, I think they called it SOS, series of quarter-inch reel-to-reel tape recording where you could record over your previous recording without erasing it. And I would take this mic, and I remember holding it in my right hand, running it through some of these Boss pedals to give it reverb and a lot of other odd things, and then playing the Oberheim with my left hand so I could coordinate when my breath would run out. And I was doing things like, and I'm hitting the chord at the same time. And it's kind of it's an eerie effect. And I used it a couple of times in the cue that's called Iceberg on the CD from Entrada Records, and also on, I think it might be called Arrival, something where the entity appears. So those are the musical elements that seemed to be necessary to tell this particular story. There was a wonderful guy named Harold Schneider, who was the producer. There was a wonderful guy named Frank de Filita, who is the writer. By the way, Frank de Filita, I believe his son did a movie as well. I'm just giving that a little plug because I saw it on cable, and it's called Two Family House, and I think that's the movie, if I'm correct. It's really wonderful. So anyway, Frank wrote the novel. There was Frank Uriosti, who was an editor, and then, of course, the great Sidney Furie, Canadian director who I knew from his previous work, The Ipcress File. And when someone told me I might have a chance to work with Sidney, I was really excited. The way he framed angles, and he's just a wonderful filmmaker, wonderful man. It was great working with him. So a meeting was set up. I believe I had already worked with Harold, the producer. And I think that's how I came into it in the first place. And a meeting was set up with Sid Furie. I can't quite remember the sequence of things, but I was very impressed with Sid. And then I met Barbara Hershey, the actress, and the whole experience was very inclusive. I could discuss the score with her. I met the cameraman, I think his name was Steve Burham, a wonderful guy. And I was present when he was doing a kind of steady cam thing in a conference with the shrinks. So I felt very included in the process. And I believe it came about through Harold Schneider, who is, by the way, one of the Schneider brothers, Bert Schneider. It was called BBS Productions. They did all those great classic films of the 1970s that involved Jack Nicholson, Five Easy Pieces, and all those great classics. So anyway, it was, I believe, Harold who was the key person who brought me in. I did not read the novel. I usually don't like to read the script. I feel that for me, the written word is another universe, and the film speaks to me in so many ways, both blunt and subtle, that really form my musical approach, that the written word could lead me here or there, but the film leads me directly to what it talks to me directly about what it needs, what it's lacking, what strengths and weaknesses it has. And it's that I'm scoring. I'm scoring the film. So I didn't really start by reading the novel. If I have an opportunity to get an early head start on a project and I maybe read the script or a novel just to have an extra bit of time to start thinking, that's kind of good, but it wasn't necessary in this one. And I know Frank wrote a great novel, and I was told what the story was about, but by the time I could actually see it and experience it, that's when I really got into it. The director, Sidney Furie, was just really one of the best directors I've worked with, and I've worked with some incredible directors. Sidney had a wonderful sense of humor. He was very direct. He was very involving, and it was highly collaborative. I was constantly working with him and refining ideas, and he was very both encouraging and specific. And we also, once we identified parts of the film that needed this or that kind of treatment, we were able to zero in. I was working on the thrasher idea, the attacks, and I could just come up with dozens of ways of going about the same concept, and we just refined it until it was exactly where he wanted it. It turns out that same effect that we refined made an impression on a young Quentin Tarantino, who remembered it and then wanted to use it in *Inglourious Bastards* for the appearance of the Nazi officer, Landa. His name is said, and then this pounding music from the entity comes in. So basically, all of that is attributable to Sid Furie and to his, I think, brilliant directorial approach to the film. I did get the feeling from Sid Furie that he was a very musical guy. And it didn't surprise me that he would take on a movie like Lady Sings the Blues. He's just any director who isn't musical is in big trouble, because film is the visual part of a musical experience for me. And all of the great directors, I don't care whether it's Steven Spielberg or Alfred Hitchcock or Quentin Tarantino or this one or that one, the ones who are great directors really are musical people. They understand the nature of music and what music can do for film. So, yeah, absolutely. The good thing about Sidney was that he was both open and specific and clear. He wasn't dictatorial. He wasn't coming in with a fixed idea that I had to somehow find. We didn't have temp music, thank God. I mean, we created the temp music together. And I think that's one of the reasons why the music from the entity is sort of original feeling. A lot of it is. I was inspired in the opening, a certain aspect of it was inspired by the tubular bells music in The Exorcist. So the music in The Exorcist influenced a certain tonality that I used in the main and end credits. But basically, the music was, I was allowed to be original and do something that wasn't coming from another movie. And one of the reasons I was able to do that is that Sid Fury was so permissive of my creativity. He was so encouraging of it and allowing me to go where I needed to, but he was always there. That's what a great director does with an actor or with anyone that they're working with, is they give you plenty of room to be creative, but they'll reel you in if or they'll guide you if you're going off course. So Sid was of that kind. Okay, we call the attack music, in Sidney Fury's words, the thrasher. That was his way of referring to it. It's a very complex way that we arrived at that. In the CD that we re-released a few years ago on Entrada, I recreated some of the layers that we used in creating that pounding effect. It wasn't just boom, 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 with a percussion instrument or whatever. Among the elements in there was a very, very dirty electric guitar. Tom-toms going on each strong beat. So there was a percussive element. There was low piano. There was sit-down drums playing on the hi-hat along with the toms. We overdubbed pretty much all of this. It wasn't one simultaneous take. God, there were just a good number of elements, and we blended them to create the percussive effect, but so that you couldn't quite identify what it was you were hearing. You were just feeling the impact of it. So there was a wonderful, wonderful recording engineer that we recorded at Village, Joel Fine, and Joel was responsible for helping us get those highly compressed, very percussive sounds and very well mixed. So that was part of what made that the thrasher such an effective and kind of memorable attack sort of music. Well, I approached the compositional aspects of the entity in different ways for the different kinds of music. The main title was based on an old Italian idea called passacaglia, which is a repetition of a fundamental bass idea, or some other ostinato that repeats, and then there's something placed against it. So that was the overall musical formal design to the opening and closing. And other places where that idea is used. The Carla's theme is compositional. It's melody, harmony. You hear it in its most clear form in the finale, where you hear a French horn playing her theme with strings. It's just a very traditional approach where there are chords, there's a melody, and the melody had to reflect a certain personal nobility, ba dee da 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 dee da. That idea that it's cohesive and there's a sweetness and a nobility to it. So I approached that in a very traditional manner. The thrasher was very untraditional. I approached it like a mad rock and roller who had retired from punk, which may or may not have been invented at the time. I can't remember. Certainly there was no hip hop when we did this. I approached it more like from the gut and less as a compositional concept. I wrote the song "Who's Got the Power" as a source music, but also a very heavy metal kind of rough-edged. We got a wonderful singer named Mark Berger who did this kind of great metal kind of voice. And I think we had just terrific players in the studio for that one. And I wrote the lyric quickly on a paper bag, which I still have, where I've written, "Who's got the power over me, who's got the power," which is the question Barbara Hershey's asking herself. But it's basically a source song. Wherever I get an opportunity to write a little opera, I'm always up for that. So it was nice to bring in a lyric idea. So I was using a wide array of methods, a kind of heavy metal songwriter thing for that. I was kind of wearing my hat as a lover of Beethoven, Mozart, and Bach when I conducted the source music. Very traditional Passacaglia for the opening, as I mentioned, and a very traditional melody harmony thing for Carla. And then I would have to say I was in my synthesizer electronic mode for high and low dread, which is basically synthesis. Wasn't so much compositional ideas as it was working with sound and using the physics of sound to create certain kinds of effects. So I had a wide array of compositional approaches on this one. Well, isn't it a challenge for a composer always to, if you're going to be dark, you have to have light. If you're going to scare, you also have to comfort. And to be able to manipulate those two forces simultaneously is really what the art is pretty much about, especially in a horror movie. So essentially, any delicacy in the piano is more than offset by the low basses, the menace. Also, there's something about the delicacy of piano, celeste, harp, harpsichord, those kinds of very, gossamer, transparent instruments where you can kind of see through the music as opposed to the density of brass or string clusters or something. That really brings an element into these things of a lighter touch so we can feel the darkness. If you want to cast a dark shadow, you have to have the light, and this is sort of like the light musically that allows the more shadowed elements to make a statement. Well, Barbara Hershey, I was so privileged. First of all, I got to hear about her from Sidney as he was working with her and what he needed from her and what he was trying to do. So even before I met her, I was aware of what she was bringing to the film. On the several occasions where I did meet her, I was able to ask her questions about her character. She's really smart, beautiful, incredible actress, and it was just one of those bonuses which I usually don't get, where I can actually somehow include the actor or actress in my process. And she's so remarkable. I think this is one of her best performances, and maybe not one of her more famous ones. But there's such a depth of complexity with simplicity. She's kind of essentially a simple character with a tremendously complex backlog in her being. And that really fed the music a lot. I was very lucky to have that, the Barbara Hershey connection while I was writing. Well, there are a number of things that a composer has to be aware of in scoring a film, especially a horror film. Lighting, you know, is it night, is it day, is it winter, is it summer, the seasons, what's going on in the world of the characters. And in the entity, there's a lot of sun, you know, summer, sun, daytime scenes that are very mundane, very quotidian, very ordinary in the apartment and in these different places. So in essence, the music finds its place to bring something that isn't already there. If it's a bright, sunshiny scene and we want terror, there's really nowhere to get it in the lighting and in the ambiance, so the music has to bring it. The process where we decide where music is going to go is called spotting. We pick the spot where the music starts, we pick the spot where the music stops with the director, and in between we do something that has to be accomplished. We create a feeling of high dread, as Sidney would say, or we you know, create some warmth for Carla or whatever we're doing. And essentially, we're given a cue sheet, which is a piece of notebook paper, a piece of type paper, with the music editor's notation of all that was discussed, where it happens exactly in the spotting, so that, let's say, music starts at 0 seconds, and at 6.3 seconds, Carla gets up and walks, you know, whatever the direction is, it's all given to the composer within that spotting notes. And whatever it is that needs to happen, we maybe watch scenes over 50 times or whatever it takes to really understand what's needed, to go through the different ways we might achieve it, and to decide on the one that will show the director, and then work with the director on refining it. So the whole spotting idea is a very crucial part of the film music process. And as you observed, the season, the time of day, the circumstances, all of that plays a huge role in whether we spot the music there or not. This is a good film. You know, I can say this about, I've done a lot of horror movies where there's a strong woman in the lead role. We were talking about Barbara Hershey, strong woman in the lead role. A Nightmare on Elm Street, same thing, strong woman standing up to evil power. Cujo, strong woman, Dee Wallace, standing up to evil, to menace, and being strong, protective, and heroic. So in a way, each of those three movies that I mentioned, Cujo, The Entity, and Elm Street, gives the actress an opportunity to confront the evil on screen. And in The Entity, that confrontation takes place when the entity is frozen by the liquid hydrogen, and she's able to say, you know, you're nothing, which is what all of the other women have done, and they triumph. And her moment of triumph is really magnificent. It's a magnificent moment, and it reminded me, it just popped into my head. I remember Barbara Hershey saying, that she said, "You've come forth to hurt me and hurt my family." And she said, "Can I say," I remember her as an actress, saying, "That's such a weird word. Nobody uses that word anymore, to come forth." But she does use it, and it's on screen. And I just remembered her kind of musing, or maybe even joking with Sydney and myself about that word coming forth. But she does say that, "You've come forth to hurt me and hurt my family, and I'm going to stand up to you," basically. So I think the movie has its place in the film literature as a movie about a strong woman standing up to evil, about a movie where it's difficult to decipher whether we're dealing with mental illness or a supernatural event. And the drama of that is powerful. And I think the hats go off to Sid Fury, certainly to Frank DiFilippo and Harold Schneider and Barbara, and the wonderful cast. I mean, when I'm given something like that, it's a gift, because then I can do what I do. If I'm given something that doesn't work and people are saying, "Oh, God, save us from this thing," it's not, that's a nightmare, and not a Nightmare on Elm Street, which was a good experience. So anyway, essentially, I think this movie is just a good movie and deserves a place in film history as just that. Not a good horror movie, but actually a good movie with good acting and directing, and it was a pleasure to be a part of it.